I had always known that my great-grandma didn't have family. In late October of last year, she decided to tell me the truth about what really happened. We were visiting her for her birthday. It was a tradition in our household. A road trip we knew in the back of our minds would only take a few more times. She was turning 98. In my childhood, the journey to central Iowa had been fun and light-hearted affair. But now the trips were overshadowed by the thought that each of us knew this trip might be our last. For several hours, we drove through farm fields that stretched from horizon to horizon. My grandma's house was down a narrow dirt road off a gravel tractor lane. As a city girl, it was more or less the most remote possible dwelling I could imagine. She was born there, had lived her entire life. Every single year of my life, this house and its land had been exactly the same. The sky was open blue, the earth was a sea of waving gold. There has never been anything that could overshadow these feelings of freedom. The bell was a simple thing raised high on an old metal crook. It sat out in the fields about a quarter-mile from the house, serving as a measure of the wind. If a storm was coming, the bell was supposed to ring, a necessary precaution in tornado country. The only problem was, the bell and its crook had rusted over long ago. Every time I got out of the family van from age 5 to age 26, I glanced at the direction and felt a sense of unease as my gaze fell upon the decayed artifact. This time, at age 27, I looked over and saw that the bell had been scraped and polished. Who had cleaned the bell? And why? I tried to stop thinking about it as we gathered in the kitchen and said our hello. My great-grandma was making tea. She was a frail woman for whom movement was difficult, but she'd never let this stop her. Soon the tea was ready and we had a nice time. That night, when everyone else was long asleep, I happened to open my eyes and see a glow under the door of the guest room I shared with my brother. My parents were in a different room and wouldn't see the same light, so it was up to me to investigate. Quietly, so as not to wake up him, I crept out and down, finding my grandma still awake. She sat in her big leather chair, gazing at the TV. She asked me without looking my way, "You don't fall for this stuff, do you?" She pointed her thin little arm at the nearby couch. "Sit," I said. "I'm going to tell you a family secret," she said softly, finally looking my direction. "It's for you and possibly for your brother, but not your parents. Do you understand?" I didn't. Not fully, but I nodded. "You know that I was born in this house, lived with my family, but then raised by an uncle after it all happened." She didn't wait for my nod. I was 10 years old that night. It was my birthday. My mother had gotten me a small cake about the size of Eurofest. I looked forward to that cake every year, since we didn't exactly have sweets. It was 11 cents, so rather expensive, but my mother got one for every one of us on our birthdays, no matter what she had to save. I was so excited for that cake, but I wasn't allowed to eat it until well after supper. Father came in from fields in the evening, dirty and tired as all get out. He ate in silence while we chattered endlessly about what the type of cake it would be. Under the frosting, who knew? It might be raspberry, vanilla, or even chocolate. We grew silent as Father neared the cleaning of his plate, an event which would mark the end of supper. He stopped at the last piece, holding it at moving above the plate. We turned our heads. It was the bell. The bell was ringing out in the fields. "Is there gonna be a tornado?" Arthur asked. My mother shook her head, smiled, and told us not to worry. No wind meant no storm, but that bell kept ringing. My brother and sisters and I ran up to the window. Opening it, we found nothing but absolutely still, chilly air. The sound stopped finally. In another minute or two, the bell began ringing again. "His knot must have come loose," Arthur said. He grabbed a full lamp and hurried out the front door, around the house and into the fields, while we watched from the window. But the lamp was easier to see, and we were absolutely certain he reached the crook. The bell stopped ringing. At that point, we had no reason to think anything was amiss. Only problem was, we still felt no wind at all. We stared at that unmoving light for a strangely long period of time. What was he doing out there? The bell began ringing again. My father began grumbling that there were no more suns to send outside. Our mother laughed. "Ruth, be a dear and go find your silly brother." Ruth accepted the lamp. This lamp was brighter, and we could actually see her caring hand and her white pajamas. On the way there, she regularly called out, "Arthur, are you lost?" About halfway to where the previous light had stopped, her calls went instantly silent mid-sentence. It wasn't that she'd given up yelling. The sound reaching us had simply stopped completely. We could still see her carrying the lamp. She even raised the house lamp near her face, and we saw her shouting into the darkness. We just didn't hear anything, nothing except that constantly clanging bell. "Mary, Eleanor," and I looked up at our parents. My father shook his head. "So there is wind out there after all. The air is like a river inside an ocean. It's moving fast out there, but we can't feel it here." My mother seemed worried. We all glued our eyes to that open window. Ruth reached the bell, and in the stronger light, it entered our view unmoving at the exact same time we heard it stop ringing. She seemed to silently yell a time or two before moving closer to the motionless bell. A half-tied rope hung from the crook, an indication that someone had attempted to tie it, but we couldn't see nobody near her. She put the lamp down on the ground to free her hands for tying the rope the rest of the way, so we stopped seeing her. We waited, breaths held. Her light continued to sit there. Our mother nodded in agreement. "Eleanor, go fetch your sister, will you?" Eleanor shook her head. "No way, it's scary out there." "It's just a game," said father. "You're not playing a game with us, are you? Go get your sister and brother. Tell them to come back in." She must have happened to cross that invisible silent threshold at that moment, because she turned around in surprise and stepped closer. "I heard your voice go quiet, but there is no wind. Papa's wrong." She stepped away again. "See, when I pass this point, She held up the candle to show us that her mouth was still moving, but we heard nothing. "It's just a game," father insisted. "They are all lying. She's just pretending to make noise." Eleanor reached the bell. She reached down for the lamp Ruth had left. "See?" Mary whispered to father. "The candle is not going out, even though she's not protecting the flame. There is no wind out there." "But the bell is ringing," he said gruffly. "So there is wind." Next to me, Mary began to cry. "It's a game," father said angrily. "It's just a game they're playing." Eleanor threw the lamp at something in the darkness. We saw the lamp crash and go dark, but heard nothing. She raced toward us. The bell continued to clang. We waited in terrified silence. Mother turned with a candle for each of us, and we sat near the window. Nothing and no one moved. For hours the bell clanged without wind. The bell clanged and clanged, driving deeper into our ears with each passing minute. Near midnight we broke. Father was beyond agitated. "Mary, go find your brother and sisters." "No," she cried. "I'm not going out there." Mother glared at her. "You have to. This game has to stop." Mary burst into tears and climbed out the window. Holding her small candle, she edged out into the fields. Her flame snuffed out. The bell began ringing again. I suddenly realized I was the only child left in the house. Parents were both continued shouting and finally went to the dark, until they passed that point, and all went silent, except for the bell. Twice more it stopped ringing, and twice more it began again. In panic and terror, I closed the window and pushed all of the furniture against every inch right to the house. I was alone. Somehow, I was alone. By the length of my candle, it was 3 in the morning when the knock came at the door. I trembled, but I didn't make a sound. I shook, holding my candle tight. The third knock was more like a kick, and I heard the door explode inward. Slow, quiet steps moved through the house. Whoever it was seemed to be pausing and listening at times. The bell began ringing again, but this time it rang from inside the house. It rang from the kitchen, it rang from near the bed, It ran outside my cupboard, and then it opened. I sat mouth open and eyes wide as I waited for my grandmother to continue. After a bit I realized that was it. But what did you see? She shook her head. That's not the point. I'm here, so obviously I survived. I asked, you're not just pulling my leg, this really happened? The thing that opened the cupboard door and stared at me from the dark, the thing that hoped to wait out my candle before the coming of dawn, had a bell tied to one of its ugly teeth, such that it would clang when its mouth was opened for hunting. Somehow, some way, some heroic poor soul managed to tie a warning bell to the thing before they disappeared in the mouth. We heard that warning bell all night long, and yet my entire family woke out there, one by one. I narrowed my eyes. What are you saying? She grabbed my hand briefly. Fear will tell you to put your candle out, but your head will tell you to keep it lit. Don't give in to fear. Turning my head, I became aware of a sound in the distance. Is that the bell? I was so caught up I didn't notice. How long has that been ringing? And she just turned back to the television.